was left behind to die, until the Comanche chief stepped through the flames and changed everything. But what he saw in her, and why he claimed her as his own, is a truth you'll never forget. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden walls of Fort Griffin, casting sharp shadows across the dusty parade ground. Sarah Mitchell sat in her wooden wheelchair near the window of the small room she occupied in the back of the general store, watching the townspeople go about their daily business with a mixture of longing and resignation. 6 months had passed since the accident that had shattered her spine and stolen her parents, and in that time, she had learned a painful truth. Sympathy had an expiration date. "I don't know what we're going to do with her, Margaret." Mrs. Patterson's voice drifted through the thin walls. Sarah recognized the tone immediately, the one people used when they thought she couldn't hear them, or perhaps when they simply didn't care if she could. "She just sits there all day. Can't work, can't contribute. It's not Christian to say it, but she's become a burden on the whole community." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles turning white. She had heard variations of this conversation dozens of times since the accident. At first, people had been kind, bringing food and offering hollow words of comfort. But as weeks turned to months and it became clear that she would never walk again, the kindness had evaporated like morning dew under the harsh Texas sun. "The Reverend says we have a duty to care for her," Margaret's voice responded, though it lacked conviction. Her parents were good people, God rest their souls. Good people, yes, but they're gone now, and we can't afford to feed someone who can't earn their keep. My Henry says we should send her to Dallas to one of those charity houses. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. She had once been engaged to marry Thomas Brennan, the blacksmith's son. He had broken off the engagement 2 weeks after the accident, unable to meet her eyes as he stammered about how his future required a wife who could properly manage a household. She had seen him just yesterday, walking arm in arm with Mary Louise Cooper, laughing at something she had said. The room she occupied belonged to Mr. Jenkins, who owned the general store. He had offered it out of respect for her father, who had been his business partner before the accident. But even his patience was wearing thin. Just last week he had mentioned casually that he might need the space for storage come winter. Sarah wheeled herself closer to the window, looking out at the vast expanse of prairie beyond the fort's walls. The grass rippled like water in the wind, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, she knew, were the Comanche tribes that everyone in Fort Griffin feared. Stories circulated constantly about raids, about stolen livestock and burned homesteads. The soldiers stationed at the fort spent most of their time on patrol, trying to maintain an uneasy peace that everyone knew was fragile at best. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Miss Sarah?" It was young Timothy, Mr. Jenkins's son. "My pa says to tell you that supper will be ready in an hour. He also says, well, he says he needs to talk to you after we eat." Sarah's stomach tightened. She knew what that conversation would be about. "Thank you, Timothy. Please tell your father I'll be there." The boy hesitated in the doorway, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Unlike the adults, he didn't seem to view her as a burden, just a curiosity. "Miss Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Does it hurt? Your legs, I mean?" Sarah considered the question. Physical pain would have been easier to bear than the emotional anguish of being unwanted, but she didn't say that. "Sometimes I feel phantom sensations like they're still there, but mostly I just feel nothing at all." Timothy nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry that happened to you. It wasn't fair." His simple, honest words touched something deep inside her. "No, Timothy, it wasn't fair, but thank you for saying so." After he left, Sarah sat in silence, contemplating her limited options. She had no family left, no prospects, and no money beyond the few dollars her parents had saved. The charity house in Dallas that Mrs. Patterson had mentioned was reportedly a grim place, where the infirm were housed in crowded conditions and treated more like prisoners than patients. That evening, as she sat at the Jenkins family table, pushing food around her plate while Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat repeatedly, preparing to deliver whatever speech he had rehearsed, the sound of gunfire erupted outside. "Comanche!" someone shouted in the street. "Comanche raiders!" The fort exploded into chaos. Mr. Jenkins jumped from his chair, grabbing his rifle from above the fireplace. "Margaret, take the children to the cellar, now!" Mrs. Jenkins herded Timothy and his younger sister toward the back of the store, but she paused, looking back at Sarah with wide, frightened eyes. For a moment, Sarah thought she might offer to help her to safety. Instead, Mrs. Jenkins simply said, "May God have mercy," and disappeared down the cellar stairs, closing the door behind her. Sarah sat alone in the dining room as the sounds of battle intensified outside. Gunshots cracked through the air, punctuated by war cries and the screams of horses. She could smell smoke, acrid and thick, already beginning to seep through the walls. With determined effort, Sarah wheeled herself toward the front of the store. Through the window, she could see the fort in complete disarray. Comanche warriors on horseback swept through the streets, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Soldiers scrambled to mount a defense, but they had clearly been caught off guard. A flaming arrow struck the roof of the building next door, and within moments flames began to spread. Sarah realized with growing horror that the general store was directly in the path of the fire. The wind was pushing the blaze toward her, and she was trapped. She tried to wheel herself toward the back door, but her path was blocked by overturned furniture from the family's panicked flight to the cellar. The smoke was growing thicker, making it hard to breathe. Sarah coughed, her eyes watering as she struggled to navigate around the obstacles. "Help!" she called out, but her voice was lost in the chaos outside. "Please, someone help me!" The front window shattered from the heat, and flames began to lick at the wooden frame of the building. Sarah could feel the temperature rising, could hear the ominous crackle of fire consuming everything in its path. She tried once more to reach the back door, but her wheelchair caught on a fallen chair, and she couldn't free it. "This is how I die," she thought with strange clarity. "Not from my injuries, but from being left behind because no one thought I was worth saving." Just as she resigned herself to her fate, the front door burst open. Through the smoke, she saw a figure on horseback, a Comanche warrior with long black hair and a face painted with red and white markings. He dismounted in one fluid motion and strode toward her through the flames as if they were nothing more than an inconvenience. Their eyes met, and Sarah saw something unexpected in his gaze, not hatred or bloodlust, but a fierce determination. He was older than she had expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with a strong jawline and eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Without a word, he lifted her from the wheelchair, cradling her in his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. Sarah wanted to scream, to fight, but she was paralyzed by more than just her injury. She was paralyzed by the absurdity of being rescued by the very people everyone in Fort Griffin feared most. He carried her outside, where other warriors had gathered. The fort was burning in several places now, and the remaining soldiers had retreated to the stockade. The Comanche had clearly accomplished whatever they had come to do, rounding up horses and taking supplies. One of the younger warriors spoke rapidly in Comanche, gesturing at Sarah. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. He was questioning why their chief had bothered to save her, especially given her obvious disability. The man holding her, who Sarah now realized must be their leader, responded in a voice that carried absolute authority. Then, in accented but clear English, he said words that would change everything. "She is mine now." The other warriors fell silent, accepting his decree without further argument. He placed Sarah carefully on his horse, then mounted behind her, one arm wrapped securely around her waist to keep her steady. As they rode away from the burning fort, Sarah looked back to see people emerging from their hiding places, watching the Comanche retreat. None of them called out for her. None of them seemed to notice or care that she was being taken. The ride across the prairie was surreal. Sarah had never been on a horse before her accident, and certainly never imagined her first experience would be like this. The warrior held her securely, adjusting his grip whenever the terrain became rough to ensure she wouldn't fall. The other warriors rode in formation around them, moving with practiced efficiency toward wherever they called home. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Sarah finally found her voice. "Why did you save me?" she asked, not sure if he would understand or answer. The Comanche chief did not answer her question immediately. They rode in silence as the landscape changed around them. the flat prairie giving way to rolling hills dotted with mesquite and juniper trees. Sarah's body ached from the unfamiliar position, but she forced herself to stay alert, to observe everything she could about her captors and their destination. As darkness fell, the group finally stopped at a camp nestled in a valley beside a clear running creek. Several teepees were arranged in a circle, and Sarah could see women and children moving about, tending fires and preparing food. The arrival of the warriors was greeted with ululating cries and animated conversations in Comanche. The chief dismounted first, then carefully lifted Sarah down, carrying her toward the largest teepee. Inside, he placed her gently on a pile of buffalo robes and blankets that had been arranged as a bed. The interior was surprisingly spacious and well-organized, with various items hanging from the poles, weapons, clothing, and dried herbs bundled together. "You will stay here," he said, his English measured and deliberate. "You are safe." "Safe?" Sarah's voice cracked with emotion and exhaustion. "I've been taken captive by Comanche warriors. How am I safe?" He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "In your fort you were left to burn. Here you will be protected." He gestured to her legs. "You cannot walk?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "Not since the accident." He nodded, as if confirming something he had already suspected. "I am called Running Wolf. I am chief of this band." "What are you called?" "Sarah. Sarah Mitchell." "Sarah," he repeated, the name sounding strange but not unpleasant in his accent. "You will rest now. Tomorrow we talk more." Before she could ask any of the hundreds of questions swirling in her mind, he left the teepee, leaving her alone with her confusion and fear. Sarah lay back on the buffalo robes, which were surprisingly soft and warm. Through the gap in the teepee's entrance, she could see the central fire and hear the voices of the tribe members talking and laughing. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by strange sounds and the weight of her new reality. When dawn broke, Sarah woke to find a young Comanche woman entering the teepee with a wooden bowl of something that smelled like cornmeal porridge. The woman appeared to be in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. She smiled at Sarah and set the bowl down beside her, then made eating motions with her hands. "Thank you," Sarah said softly, and the woman's smile widened at the acknowledgement. Over the next few days, Sarah began to understand the rhythm of life in the Comanche camp. The young woman, whose name she learned was Gentle Rain, became her primary caretaker. Despite the language barrier, they found ways to communicate through gestures and expressions. Gentle Rain helped her with personal needs without any sign of disgust or impatience, treating her with a dignity that Sarah hadn't experienced since before her accident. Running Wolf visited each evening, sitting cross-legged near her bed and asking questions about her life before the raid. Sarah found herself telling him things she hadn't shared with anyone, about her parents' death, about Thomas's abandonment, about the slow erosion of her place in Fort Griffin's community. "In my tribe," Running Wolf said one evening, "a person's worth is not measured only by what they can do with their body. It is measured by the strength of their spirit, by their courage, by their wisdom. You have survived much pain. This makes you strong." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Your people don't see me as a burden?" "A burden?" He seemed genuinely puzzled by the concept. "You are a person. People are not burdens, they are family, tribe. When one cannot walk, others carry them. When one cannot see, others are their eyes. This is how people survive." His words opened something inside Sarah that she hadn't realized had been locked tight. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to cry, not from despair, but from a strange mixture of relief and grief. Running Wolf sat quietly, not uncomfortable with her tears, simply present. As weeks passed, Sarah learned more about her new home. She discovered that Running Wolf's wife had died 3 years earlier from a fever, leaving him without children. He had not taken another wife, focusing instead on leading his people through increasingly difficult times, as white settlers pushed further into Comanche territory. She also learned that her rescue had not been random. Running Wolf explained, through a combination of his English and Gentle Rain's pantomimed translations, that he had seen her through the window before the raid, sitting alone while others fled to safety. Something about her situation had resonated with him, reminded him of his own feelings of isolation after his wife's death. "When I saw them leave you," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I saw how your people value life. They save only who is easy to save, who is useful to them. This is not the Comanche way. Sarah found herself adapting to camp life in ways she never would have imagined. Gentle rain brought her materials to work with her hands, teaching her to bead decorative patterns on leather and to prepare certain foods. Other women in the tribe began to include her in their daily activities, bringing their work to Running Wolf's teepee so Sarah could participate in their conversations, even when she couldn't understand all the words. She was particularly drawn to an older woman named Silver Fox, who reminded her of her own grandmother. Silver Fox had arthritis that made it difficult for her to walk some days, and she and Sarah developed a special bond, two women who understood physical limitation but refused to be defined by it. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after her arrival, Running Wolf entered the teepee with a serious expression. Sarah, I must speak with you about important matter. She set down her beadwork, her heart suddenly racing. What is it? You have been here many weeks now. Some in tribe ask questions about your place here. In Comanche way, when chief takes captive, there are certain expectations. He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. But you are not truly captive. I brought you here to save your life, not to own you. I want you to understand you are free to choose your path. Choose my path? Sarah repeated. What does that mean? It means, Running Wolf said, meeting her eyes directly, that you can return to your people if you wish. I will take you back to Fort Griffin, or to any other white settlement. You can leave whenever you want. Sarah stared at him, completely unprepared for this declaration. You would just let me go? Yes, but I hope you will not go. I hope you will choose to stay, to become part of our tribe, not as captive, but as, he hesitated, as one of us. The weight of this decision pressed down on Sarah. Return to Fort Griffin, where she had been treated as an inconvenience, where the best she could hope for was charity tinged with resentment, or stay here, among people who had shown her more genuine kindness in weeks than she had received in months from her own community. If I stayed, she asked carefully, what would my life be like? Running Wolf considered this. You would be member of tribe, protected, cared for. Your skills with beading, with preparation of food, these are valued. You would contribute as you are able, and tribe would help with what you cannot do alone. He paused again. And there is another possibility, if you are willing. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The way Running Wolf looked at her, the careful consideration in his voice made his meaning clear even before he spoke the words. In my tribe, I am alone. No wife, no children. This is not good for a chief. People need to see their leader has family, has connection to future. He shifted slightly, a rare sign of uncertainty from this normally confident man. I have come to respect you, Sarah. Your strength, your spirit. I have seen how you adapt, how you do not give up even when life is very hard. These are qualities of good partner. Are you asking me to marry you? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. I am asking if you would consider this path. I do not expect answer now. This is big decision, and you must think carefully. But I want you to know that my offer is sincere. If you accept, you would be my wife in all ways, honored and respected. If you do not accept, you are still welcome to stay as member of tribe with no obligation to me. Sarah's mind reeled. 2 months ago, she had been prepared to die alone in a burning building, abandoned by everyone she knew. Now a Comanche chief was proposing to make her his wife, offering her not just survival, but a place of honor in his community. Can I have time to think about this? She asked. Of course, take all time you need. Running Wolf stood to leave, then paused at the teepee's entrance. Sarah, I want you to know something else. I do not offer this from pity. I offer because when I look at you, I see someone I wish to know better, to share life with. Your legs do not work. This is true. But your heart works, your mind works, your hands work. These are the things that matter. After he left, Sarah sat in stunned silence. Gentle rain arrived shortly after, and though they couldn't fully communicate verbally, the young woman seemed to sense that something significant had happened. She sat beside Sarah, holding her hand in a gesture of solidarity and support. Over the following days, Sarah observed Running Wolf more carefully, trying to imagine what life as his wife would mean. She watched how he led his people, with fairness and wisdom. She noticed how children ran to him without fear, how he listened patiently to disputes and found solutions that satisfied both parties. She saw how he cared for the elderly and ensured that everyone in the tribe had what they needed. She also observed how he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. There was warmth in his gaze, and something that might have been hope. It made her heart beat faster in a way she hadn't felt since before the accident, when she had still believed in possibilities. Silver Fox, who had become her confidant, spoke to her through Gentle Rain's translations. "Running Wolf is good man," the old woman said. "His heart was broken when his wife died. For long time he was only chief, not man. But now when he speaks of you, I hear the man returning. This is good thing." "But I'm not Comanche," Sarah protested. "I don't know your ways, your language, your customs. How can I be a chief's wife?" Silver Fox laughed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "You learn. We teach. Important thing is not what you know now, but what is in your heart. And your heart, I think, is already becoming Comanche." Sarah realized the old woman was right. Without consciously deciding to, she had begun to think of the camp as home. She looked forward to her daily interactions with the other women, to the quiet evening conversations with Running Wolf, to feeling useful and valued. The thought of returning to white society, with its rigid expectations and judgment, filled her with dread. 3 weeks after Running Wolf's proposal, Sarah asked him to sit with her. "I have thought very carefully about what you asked me," she began, her hands trembling slightly. "And I want you to know that my answer is yes. I will marry you, if the offer still stands." The smile that spread across Running Wolf's face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "The offer stands. It will always stand." He took her hands in his, and Sarah felt a surge of warmth at the contact. "You have made me very happy, Sarah. I will do everything in my power to make you happy as well." "You already have," she said softly. "You saved my life. But more than that, you gave me back my dignity. You made me feel like a person again, not a broken thing to be pitied or discarded." The wedding ceremony took place a week later, conducted according to Comanche tradition. Sarah wore a dress of soft deerskin that the women of the tribe had made for her, decorated with intricate beadwork that she had helped design. Running Wolf stood beside her in his finest clothing, his face painted with symbols of protection and prosperity. The ceremony itself was simpler than the elaborate church weddings Sarah had attended in her former life, but it felt more meaningful. The tribe gathered in a circle around them as an elder spoke words of blessing in Comanche. Running Wolf translated the important parts for her, his voice steady and sure. When it came time to exchange gifts, Running Wolf presented her with a beautiful necklace made of silver and turquoise. "This belonged to my mother," he explained. "Now it belongs to you, symbol that you are part of my family, part of my heart." Sarah had prepared her own gift, a shirt she had made with Gentle Rain's help, decorated with beaded patterns that represented the union of 2 different paths into one shared journey. Running Wolf accepted it with visible emotion, immediately removing his current shirt to put on the new one. That night, as they lay together in their teepee, Running Wolf held Sarah close, mindful of her limitations, but making her feel cherished and desired despite them. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their future. "I never thought I would have this again," Running Wolf confessed. "After my wife died, I thought that part of my life was finished. I would be chief, but never again husband, never father. You have given me hope for these things." "I never thought I would have this at all," Sarah replied. "Even before the accident, Thomas never looked at me the way you do. He never listened to me the way you do. I thought I was settling for what I could get, but now I understand what it means to truly be partners." The seasons changed, and Sarah settled fully into her new life. She became fluent in Comanche, aided by her natural aptitude for languages and constant immersion. She developed close friendships with the women of the tribe, particularly Gentle Rain, who she discovered was Running Wolf's niece and had been specifically asked to care for her when she first arrived. Sarah also found ways to contribute that utilized her unique perspective. Having lived in both worlds, she could help the tribe navigate their increasingly complex relationship with white settlers and the U.S. government. Her ability to read and write English proved invaluable in understanding treaties and agreements that were presented to the tribe. But it was in her relationship with Running Wolf that Sarah truly flourished. They developed a deep partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection that grew into profound love. He valued her counsel on tribal matters, and she learned to trust his judgment and strength. One evening, about 8 months after their marriage, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Running Wolf placed his hand gently on Sarah's stomach. Sarah looked down at Running Wolf's hand resting on her stomach, then up at his face, seeing the question in his eyes. She had suspected for a few weeks now, but had wanted to be certain before saying anything. The tribe's medicine woman, Soaring Eagle, had confirmed it just that morning. "Yes," Sarah said softly, covering his hand with her own. "I'm with child." Running Wolf's expression transformed into one of pure joy mixed with concern. "This is wonderful news. But is it safe? With your condition, will you be well? Will the baby be well?" Sarah had asked Soaring Eagle the same questions. The medicine woman had been cautiously optimistic, explaining that while Sarah's paralysis might make the pregnancy more complicated, there was no reason to believe she couldn't carry and deliver a healthy child. The paralysis affected her legs and lower body, but her internal organs functioned normally. "Soaring Eagle says I will need extra care and attention, but she believes all will be well," Sarah assured him. "She has delivered many babies and helped women through difficult pregnancies. I trust her." Over the following months, the entire tribe rallied around Sarah's pregnancy. The women brought her special foods believed to strengthen both mother and child. Silver Fox shared traditional knowledge about pregnancy and childbirth, stories that had been passed down through generations. Gentle Rain barely left her side, attending to her needs with devoted care. Running Wolf became even more protective, insisting on carrying her everywhere, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of using her arms to move about the camp. "You carry our child," he would say. "It is my honor to carry you both." As Sarah's belly grew, so did her connection to the life growing inside her. She would sit for hours with her hands on her stomach, feeling the baby move and kick. It was a sensation that filled her with wonder, this new life that she and Running Wolf had created together, a living symbol of their love and the bridge they had built between two worlds. But the outside world was not content to leave them in peace. In Sarah's 7th month of pregnancy, a regiment of U.S. Army soldiers arrived at the camp under a flag of truce. Their commanding officer, Captain James Morrison, requested a meeting with Running Wolf. Sarah insisted on being present, despite Running Wolf's concerns about stress affecting the pregnancy. She had a terrible feeling about this visit and wanted to hear firsthand what the soldiers wanted. Captain Morrison was a stern-faced man in his 50s, with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He looked around the camp with barely concealed disdain before his gaze landed on Sarah. His expression shifted to shock, then confusion, then something darker. "Mrs. Mitchell? Sarah Mitchell from Fort Griffin?" Sarah straightened in her seat, meeting his gaze steadily. "I am Sarah, wife of Running Wolf, chief of this Comanche band." "Wife?" Morrison's voice dripped with disbelief and disapproval. "We were told you had been taken captive during the raid. We've come to negotiate your release and return to civilized society." "I am not a captive, Captain. I am here by choice. This is my home, and these are my people." Morrison's face reddened. "That's preposterous. You're a white woman. You belong with your own kind, not living like a savage. And in your condition, you need proper medical care, not whatever primitive remedies these Indians can offer." Running Wolf, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "My wife has made her choice clear, Captain. She wishes to stay. You will respect this decision." "I will do no such thing," Morrison snapped. "It's my duty to rescue American citizens from Indian captivity. Mrs. Mitchell is clearly not in her right mind. Perhaps the trauma of her capture and her obvious physical disability have impaired her judgment." Sarah felt anger surge through her. "My judgment is perfectly sound, Captain. What impaired my life was living among people who saw my paralysis as a shameful burden. Here, I am valued and loved for who I am, not pitied or discarded for what I cannot do." Morrison turned to Running Wolf. "I'm prepared to offer generous terms for her release. Horses, rifles, supplies, Name your price. She is not for sale, Running Wolf said, his voice dangerously quiet. She is my wife, mother of my child. You insult us both with this offer. The standoff continued for another tense hour, with Morrison becoming increasingly aggressive in his demands. Finally, Sarah had had enough. Drawing on every ounce of authority she had learned from watching Running Wolf lead his people, she addressed the captain directly. Captain Morrison, I will say this one final time. I am not a captive. I was left to die by the people of Fort Griffin, people who saw me as worthless because I cannot walk. Running Wolf saved my life when no one else cared whether I lived or died. He and his people have treated me with more kindness and respect than I ever received from my own community. I have married him freely, by choice, out of love. I am carrying his child, and I will raise that child here, in this tribe. Now, you can accept this and leave in peace, or you can try to take me by force and start a war. But I promise you, Captain, if you try to separate me from my husband and my people, I will fight you with everything I have. Morrison stared at her, clearly struggling to reconcile this strong, defiant woman with his expectations of a helpless victim. Finally, he shook his head. This is madness, but I can see you won't be reasoned with. I'll report back that you're here of your own free will, though I doubt they'll believe it. Don't expect any help from the U.S. government when these savages turn on you. These so-called savages have shown me more humanity than my own people ever did. Sarah replied coldly. I'll take my chances with them. After the soldiers left, Running Wolf held Sarah close, mindful of her swollen belly. You were very brave, he said, but I fear this will bring trouble. The white man's government does not like when their people choose our way of life. Let them be unhappy, Sarah said firmly. This is my choice, and I don't regret it for a moment. 2 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Sarah went into labor. Soaring Eagle and the other experienced women of the tribe gathered in the teepee, their presence both calming and reassuring. Running Wolf paced outside, traditional for Comanche fathers but clearly struggling with the inability to be by Sarah's side. The labor was long and difficult. Sarah's paralysis meant she couldn't feel the contractions in the normal way, and Soaring Eagle had to guide her through the process with careful attention to other signs. But Sarah was determined, drawing on the same strength that had carried her through the accident, through rejection and loss, through the complete transformation of her life. As dawn broke, filling the teepee with soft golden light, Sarah finally heard the sound she had been waiting for, her baby's first cry. Soaring Eagle placed the infant on Sarah's chest, and she looked down into the tiny, perfect face of her daughter. A girl, Soaring Eagle announced with a smile. Strong and healthy, like her mother. Running Wolf was summoned immediately. He entered the teepee with uncharacteristic hesitation, as if afraid this moment might not be real. When he saw Sarah holding their daughter, his eyes filled with tears. She's beautiful, he whispered, kneeling beside them. Like the sunrise. Sunrise, Sarah repeated, smiling. That's perfect. We'll call her Morning Sun, to honor both our cultures. The baby opened her eyes, dark like her father's, and seemed to look directly at Sarah. In that moment, Sarah felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. She had lost so much, her parents, her ability to walk, her former life, but she had gained something infinitely more precious. Over the following weeks, as Sarah recovered from childbirth and learned to care for her daughter, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the day of the fire, when she had been certain her life was over. She could never have imagined then that being rescued by a Comanche chief would lead to the greatest happiness she had ever known. Morning Sun thrived, a healthy baby with her father's dark hair and her mother's delicate features. The tribe celebrated her birth with traditional ceremonies, welcoming her as the daughter of their chief and a symbol of hope for the future. One evening, when Morning Sun was 3 months old, Sarah sat outside the teepee with her daughter in her arms, watching Running Wolf play with some of the tribe's children. He caught her eye and smiled, that warm, loving smile that still made her heart skip a beat. What are you thinking about? He asked, coming to sit beside her. I'm thinking about how strange life is, Sarah replied. How the worst day of my life led to the best days of my life. How being abandoned by my own people brought me to a people who truly accepted me. How losing the ability to walk taught me to see what really matters. Running Wolf took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. In Comanche belief, sometimes we must lose our old path to find our true path. Your true path led you here, to me, to our daughter, to our people. I used to think being paralyzed was the end of my story, Sarah said softly. But it was really just the beginning of a different story, a better story. As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah looked out at the land that had become her home. She thought about the woman she had been, sitting in that room in Fort Griffin, believing herself to be a burden with no future. That woman would never have believed that she could be here now, happy and loved, a wife and mother, valued member of a strong community. Morning sun stirred in her arms, making the small sounds that meant she would soon be hungry. Sarah adjusted the baby in her lap, marveling again at this tiny miracle. "Do you ever regret it?" Running Wolf asked quietly. "Leaving your old life behind?" Sarah didn't have to think about her answer. "Never, not for a single moment. That life left me behind first. You gave me a new life, one where I'm not defined by what I can't do, but celebrated for what I can. You gave me love, family, purpose, and a future I never dreamed possible. How could I regret that? I am the one who should be grateful," Running Wolf said, his voice thick with emotion. "You brought light back into my life when I thought I would walk in shadow forever. You gave me love again, and gave our people hope. You are stronger than any warrior I have ever known." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the tribe gathered around the central fire for the evening meal. Sarah and Running Wolf joined them, Morning Sun sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. The firelight flickered across the faces of people who had become Sarah's family, people who had shown her that belonging had nothing to do with blood or race, and everything to do with acceptance and love. Gentle Rain sat beside Sarah, admiring the baby as she always did. Silver Fox told stories that made everyone laugh. The children played and the adults talked, and Sarah felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She had been right when she told Captain Morrison that she would take her chances with the Comanche. They had proven to be the best chance she had ever taken. In a world that had tried to convince her she was broken and worthless, they had shown her the truth. That worth comes from the spirit, not the body, and that love can bridge any divide. Running Wolf leaned close to whisper in her ear, "Look at our daughter, Sarah. She will grow up knowing both worlds, the best of both peoples. She will be strong like you, wise like the grandmothers, brave like the warriors. She will help build understanding between our peoples." Sarah looked down at Morning Sun's peaceful face and felt hope bloom in her chest. Her daughter would never know what it felt like to be rejected or abandoned. She would grow up surrounded by love, taught that all people have value regardless of their differences. "Yes," Sarah agreed, kissing her daughter's forehead gently. "She will be a bridge just like our love is a bridge, and maybe, someday, there will be more bridges, more understanding, more acceptance." The fire crackled and sparked, sending embers floating up toward the stars. Sarah leaned against Running Wolf's shoulder, feeling his arm wrap protectively around her and their daughter. This was her life now, so different from anything she could have imagined, and yet more fulfilling than anything she had dared to dream. No one had wanted the paralyzed white woman, until the Comanche chief said she was his, and in doing so, gave her back to herself.